Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a video here to talk about a particular game that I picked up in the last, I want to say 4 or 5 months, somewhere in there. It's one that I have been really excited about. It's one that I never knew about, even though I pretty much grew up with every single DS and Game Boy Advance game of this series, because I love this series so much, whether it be on the consoles or the handhelds. It's pretty much always been fun. And I'd never heard of this particular Game Boy Advance game. It's The Sims 2 Pets. Now, mind you, I had it for GameCube, and I loved it for GameCube. My cousin and I played it for endless hours. Endless hours, dude. We loved that game. As well as The Sims 2 for PS2. And my favorite of all the Sims games ever is the Urbz Sims in the City for DS. It's incredible. It's wonderful. The one for Game Boy is basically the same thing. But anyway, Sims 2 Pets and Sims 2 are kind of different depending on which console or handheld we're talking about. For example, what I mean by that, and I've said this in some of my previous reviews, are that like the Sims 2 Pets for DS is entirely different from this particular game for Game Boy Advance that I'm reviewing. The Sims 2 Pets on DS is horrid. I mean, truly awful. Whereas when you play it on GameCube or PS2 or whatever your choice of console may be, it's wonderful. But then, I hadn't heard of this Game Boy Advance one. And I wanted to pick it up and see what it was like after a video from a guy here on YouTube named Mini-Me, who was covering all of the different the games, for handheld. And I gotta tell you, being a massive DS Sims fan, for example, Sims 2 for that console, the Urbz Sims in the City for that console, I loved those. I hated the Sims 2 Pets for DS. I went into this hoping that it would be good, because I actually like Sims games that have plots, and these handheld ones typically have stories. This particular one, it was interesting. Basically, you make a character, you move into a place called Barkersville, and I tried to play this on a couple of vacations, which was the reason I bought it. And I also bought a Nintendo DS Lite, again, for my collection to take to these vacations. And I gotta tell you, the amount of time that I dedicated to just this game, to try and beat this shit, after probably 3-4 hours, I would say about 4 or 5 hours, somewhere in there, I finally gave up on it. It's one of those games like, you ever get back in the day like Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith for Game Boy, and get so frustrated with it, even though you're having fun to an extent. I had more fun with this than I had fun with that, but still. Did you ever have a time where you just finally were like, I paid $40 for this Game Boy game and I'm fucking done? You just kind of take breaks, and every once in a while, in the future, to appreciate your Game Boy games or your DS games, you go back and you play it some. That is what this game is like, but almost more insulting. You know, I'm a big Sims guy. Like I said, I've been a Sims fan since I was a kid, like most people my age, from the 90s. The Sims 2 Pets for Game Boy Advance is one that I was so looking forward to. They had updated the graphics, they had a little bit of a different art style, but pretty much the same thing, just updated from those original games like Urbz Sims in the City for the DS or Game Boy, Sims Bustin' Out, which is fantastic on the Game Boy. They were trying to update just a little bit and make it a little bit better looking, and it's a little bit more colorful. I really like that about it. The music is okay. It's not as good as like Urbz Sims in the City or Sims Bustin' Out, but it's got its moments. I don't even like it more than the music from Sims 2 for DS, or even for the Game Boy for that matter. But the Sims 2 Pets for Game Boy Advance, where it really, really falls apart, is that you move into this town, Barkersville, you have to get a pet, and a lot of people seem to have tried to avoid that. There's not a whole lot of information about this game online because a lot of people hate it. I kind of get why. This is one of those games like the very recent review I did for The Sims 1 for PlayStation 2, that sometimes Sims games are just fucking impossible. They are just set up, they are determined you are not going to have a good time. This seems like an amateur team put together to make this game, but at the same time they had good ideas, they had good concepts. But this game, first and foremost, is next to impossible to build up any kind of money or savings in this game. I mean, every dime that you make, you're going to be spending on your pet or whatever, and I'm talking about every single angle to it. The litter box they need, the food they need, the bowls they need to eat the food and the water out of. I mean, dude, it's every single expense you could have. It's like having a real-life child, for God's sake. And the misery you feel is that same feeling. It is absolutely unfair. But then it gets worse. I started to notice that after a while, if I had, let's say, 4 items inside of my apartment thing that I rented in the beginning of the game, which is pretty much the base level home, you can buy other homes to live in, but the rent is ridiculous. You'd never be able to afford it in this game. I don't know why anybody would do that. Those houses are nice. I love that about Sims games when they offer that opportunity. But I also like it to be fair. You know, this game I will never complete because I can tell that I have too many other things and too many other games that I've bought this year alone from a recent local store that I found from a friend of mine that I love deeply, that I've been buying constant games from. And I'd rather play those than dedicate so much of my life to try to beat this stupid-ass, unfair game. Just like I said with my PS2 Sims 1 game review, I'm not going to dedicate my entire life to beat a game that's completely set the odds against you. And we're not talking about just a difficult game. We're talking about a game that is completely unfair. Again, I talked about the money issue in this game. But I noticed, like with the point I was going to bring up a minute ago, I began to notice that if I had like a shower, a toilet, a bed, and a fridge, that the shower and fridge and toilet would either get gross and dirty or they would break down literally constantly. Every 2 uses of those things, they would break down and you'd have to repair them. And it takes forever to fix anything in this game, which is just, I mean, truly obnoxious. You don't know how long you have to sit there. We're talking about 4 to 5 minutes to fix the shower. Not to clean it, but to fix it. Let's see. I started to notice, too, that if I would start adding new things in, like a couch, a stereo system if I could afford it, eventually a pet, that one of 2 things would happen. I would either have a massive house fire that the fucking police or the firemen or whoever I called wouldn't even show up, but I would get a bill. Which is insane to me. The fires were literally constant, but that was usually because of the stove having an issue, and supposedly the idea that I've read online a little bit from a couple of people seems to be that if you have too many electronics in your house, or apartment, or whatever, that it can cause the fires. It happened to me every time I cooked, on the stove. Not with the fridge, obviously, but with the stove. It would happen. The game has a plot that would be cool to follow, and I would like to enjoy it. I would like to get it more involved with the characters in the town that you meet, because they're different from the typical people you meet in other games, like Dusty Hog, or, the typical people you see in the other handheld games. It's a little bit different than that, and it was kind of nice and a little bit refreshing for that, if I'm being honest with you. But to constantly have fires, and then on top of that, the worst part of the game, the break-ins, where you have a thief break into your freaking house and steal shit every time you leave and happen to have, again, maybe over 5 items in your entire apartment. The only way to keep the thief out is to buy the stupid gnome that's expensive and put him in the front door of your house or whatever, and that apparently scares them away. But at one point, it failed me because I had a house fire and it burnt up the gnome. Then I had to clean ashes forever. I also could not make enough money in the game to afford a sink, so every time I had a dirty dish, just from eating a snack from the fridge, I had to put plates in the floor. After a while, I had about 5 or 6 plates all over the kitchen floor. Yeah. Dude, it was constant with bad shit happening to me in this game. But that's how this game is set up. Every review I've looked at it, of the 2 or 3 that I could find online, the thoughts, the Reddit pages dedicated to talking about games like this, the stuff that I would see mentioning this game, just mildly bringing it up, would tell me how unfair the odds are in this game. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, the music is kind of okay sometimes. You don't get like a motorcycle in the game as far as I can tell, or anything like that like you did in Herb Sims in the City, or The Sims 2 for Game Boy Advance. Or even the moped like in Bustin' Out for Game Boy Advance. You don't get anything cool like that. But the stores are nice. I dig that. Everything is too fucking expensive. You can't even use the grills in the park. The actual town itself, Barkersville, I really like the setup and the format for it. Everything is kind of in a circle, but kind of not. A lot of dead ends, a lot of dead-end roads. You also have like a pet cemetery on one end of the town, which was kind of a cool throwback to Stephen King's Pet Sematary. There's some cool stuff in this game, some really good ideas, but you can tell there was an amateur team put together where they had like one guy in the corner of the room who happened to be the quiet one that would just throw out these ideas, like a pet cemetery, for example, or The new way to make friends in the town where you earn like friendship points and whatever. That stuff was a good idea where they have like a mini game that you play. And I thought it was way more compact, easy. It made a lot of that communication easier rather than having to read body language like you would in real life, which is one of the worst things about any Sims game ever, in my opinion. The Sims 2 Pets for Game Boy Advance is such an uneven mess. The mini games aren't that great. The jobs games, for example, you can do training stuff eventually that leads you to competitions that I never even got close to because of how ridiculous this game was for the 4 or 5 hours I spent on it. I didn't pay a ton of money for this, and I'm glad, but it's not worth the money that I paid for it. I think I paid it for I paid $20-$30 for this, and it was not worth it at all. Trying to think, too, of what else I wanted to bring up. The mini game I was talking about, where you basically have to keep pets on a leash. Yeah, it's kind of easy to get promotions, but I think I also got demoted at one point, and that eventually just led me to the point of my last vacation in Tennessee that I was like, nah, fuck this. So I'm done. I'm not going to keep spending time on shit that is stacked against me. You know, don't go to Vegas if you expect to always win. That's my whole point here. That's my whole motivation here for you, the viewer, the listener, whatever you are. Boy, girl, anybody. Just don't even spend your time on this shit. If you love The Sims 2 for DS, if you love The Sims 2 Pets for the console, if you love the Herb Sims in the City like I do, it doesn't matter. There are bad Sims games out there because there are so many, and this is a great example of why the handheld Sims games seem to have just killed themselves and never happened ever again. Because this was the final one. From what I understand from Mini-Me's video on YouTube, this seems to be the final one of the handhelds. And frankly, deservedly so. It deserved to be, because it's fucking horrible. The menus are awful too, by the way. If you have a conversation with somebody, you have like a circle. It's like a wheel, almost. Kind of like some of the later Sims games on the TV, like consoles and computers and PCs and all that shit. But it's almost like a wheel, and you have to cycle through the different options you have to pick in a very weird way. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but that is so, I wouldn't even say unreliable. I just don't like the format, you know? But outside of that, The Sims 2 Pets has its pluses, but they're very far and few between. Or few and far between. Something like that. Whatever the old saying is, everything else about it is just unfair, unlovable, and bullshit, is what I would say. So The Sims 2 Pets for Game Boy Advance, have you played it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about it down in the comment section down below. Believe me, you don't want to spend time on this. You do not want to spend time on trying to enjoy this. And again, people, if you have a game that you don't like, don't waste your time on it. Don't force yourself to get good at it, the way the gaming community would force you to do, because the mentality of teenagers and children telling you to spend every ounce of your life to try to get better at a game that you don't even like all that much is really stupid. It's a bad concept. Just move on with your life. Play something else that's good. I have a ton of racing games and stuff that will take me hours upon hours. I have RPGs laying around. I have Silent Hill games that I love deeply. Why would I spend time on something like this if I don't like it all that much? Why would I want to get good at something that doesn't really fucking matter at the end of the day? Truly. Think about that sometimes. Anyway, The Sims 2 Pets for Game Boy Advance. If you haven't played it, don't. If you're a big, hardcore, dedicated fan of these games like I am, don't. Don't play it. It's not worth your money, your time, anything. Anyway, that's all I have to say for right now on the game. I'm sorry to waste your time talking about it, but I hope you had some enjoyment about my misery. Anyway, thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all, and goodbye.